Hello, everyone. Uh, Welcome to our public budget hearing on May 8th. Would you please stand and honor America and join me in reciting the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before I turn this over to Dr. Douglas, I just want to make comment. We have two board members that are out with medical issues tonight, and one is traveling for business, so you might see a few less people than you normally see here. So, Dr. Douglas?
Thank you, President Conklin. Ladies and gentlemen of the audience, our viewing audience at home as we're live streaming this will also be posted, members of the Board of Education. Tonight is our public hearing on the 25-26 school budget. This is a requirement under New York State education law. This is just a quick overview. Our projected state aid for 2025-2026, because the budget still has not been fully passed as of this public hearing. We have foundation aid, transportation aid, building aid, BOCES aid, and other aids, and these are the numbers we've already presented, so this is just a quick overview. And overall, the projected state aid at this point is actually a negative 0.4% or $192,210 less than last year, which means the state is not funding us and keeping up with costs and saying that the locals should burden that share. We are required to produce the tax cap calculation. In New York, you have the 2% minimum tax levy law limit. That yellow is the 2%. That's the only thing when 2% factors in, because the tax levy could be higher or lower than that 2%, but it's how it's calculated. We've shown this numerous times, but we just have to point out that 2%. That leads us through the calculation, and the biggest thing to notice is the capital exclusion from last year had $2.3 million in capital exclusion. This year it's $3.6 million. Of that $3.6 million, $1.3 million is being used out of our debt service fund reserve. And that is to help offset the local share and is part of that $3.5 million proposed levy for a total of 7.4%. In other words, that 7.4% is the how much money the district is raising from one year to the next year. It does not mean that is what your taxes would go up. What your taxes would go up is actually the rate. But so that the board knows, you've heard this, we went through the budget season, and to get a 50% vote is the 2% levy cap. And to get that, we would be at 7.4. We would still have to raise roughly $2.2 million of funds, and we would require a 50% approval on that budget, and the board would have to make about $1.3 million in reductions if they chose that budget path. However, the board, through its discussion, chose this path, which has the same exact levy to levy year at 7.4%, raising the same exact funding, but because we're using $1.3 million in debt service funds, we are not proposing from the board any reductions in staff or programming. So virtually the board had a decision on its budget. Do one at 50% voter approval and make $1.3 million in reduction and have the same levy and the same cost of $48 per $100,000 home, or challenge the tax levy, use its debt service, have 7.4%, no reductions whatsoever in academics or programs, and have the same exact cost of $48 per 100,000. The board chose to go out and ask the community for 60% approval. Both are the same funding source. So that's where we're at tonight. Here is the levy, 7.4, 3.5 million, 1.3 million of debt service to make this budget whole. This provides what we were talking about is tax levy versus tax rate. If you look in the third column from the left, you can see what the levy was for last year. Like last year, the levy was projected at 9.36%. But in August, when the actual cost of the taxpayer came in, it was actually a $44 per $100,000 reduction for challenging and not making any reductions. Although the board knows we still made $6 million, and from last year to this year, we have reduced over 5 administrative type positions throughout the district and support. So this district, for this year's budget, has those reductions in this year's budget, but it sort of gets lost because we're not talking about it anymore. The bottom line shows what the projections are for this year. It's a 7.4% levy. The budget rate of change in the tax is 3.03%. And that equates to a projected estimate of $16.42 for $1,000 of value, home value. That equates to what we said, 48 cents per thousand or $48 for $100,000 would be the conservative estimate of the maximum someone would pay in a year. That's about 92 cents difference a week, or about 13 cents a day in an increase at the most conservative level. The only difference someone has to know is that if their house is appreciated in value, that affects the final calculation. In addition, we have the summary of budget revenues, right? And our budget revenues total in all the areas, roughly about 3.03% from year over year. In other words, our revenue is up about 3.03. That's important because our expenditures have to fall within lines of our revenue. So these are slides that the board has seen, the community has seen over and over, so I won't spend a lot of time on them. And then we also are required each year, we do this, we let you know what the reserve balance are projected to be at the end of the year. That's the far right column. And out of that, the very bottom right-hand corner, debt service fund, we're projecting at 3.1 at the end of this year. But that's where that $1.3 million would come from in next year's budget. So we can't allocate it until we get into the next year. So, but that's where it would come from. Those are our reserves. As well, we also have to tell you, like we did the revenue, we have the summary of the budget expenditures. And as you look at that, salaries and benefits, you can see those 5 administrative positions have come out of there, benefits. Others that are out of there are people that were not impacted either through retirement or resignation because maybe they left for another job, or we have enrollment issues and attrition. So overall, our year-to-year change on salaries and benefits are one of the lowest. It's been at 1.86% and 1.68%. Our interfund transfer is BOCES as well as food service transfers. So that's why that's up, but that's a normal operation of business. And ultimately, our revenue and our expenditures match, which means we have a balanced budget of 3.03 in expenditures and 3.03 in revenue. So ultimately, the balanced budget is 3.03 in expenditures, like I said, 3.03 in revenues. The gap is now 0. That's what the board has approved to go out. And the tools that we use was the tax levy increase of 3.4 or $48 per 100,000. At the conservative most, we're hoping that it will be less come August, as has been our trend. We use 600,000 in employee retirement service reserve. We also use 200,000 out of employee benefit and liability reserve, which are within our statutory amounts, interfund transfers, and fund balance that we use. That is a tool that we use each year, but we always have to make sure that we monitor these tools from year to year. So therefore, you have a balanced budget. What the proposed budget includes: this budget that the board has placed before the voters to consider at 60% approval has the same request as last year. It remains staff and program strong. There isn't program reductions or staffing reductions. Have we made some reductions where we've had attrition? Yes. But most importantly, this budget includes those 5 administrative positions that have been removed from the budget. In addition, it maintains all current educational programs in academics, arts, and athletics. And it's based on the current needs and enrollment as of each budget meeting. In addition, The board allowed us to bring back about $40,000 to try to at least sustain our summer learning academy, which was previously grant funded and is no longer grant funded. So that was a little bit of an add, about 40,000. Also, it helps us to support our elementary buildings after consolidation with appropriate social, emotional, academic, and behavior supports. Specifically, we are reallocating teaching assistants to increase support for other areas that may not have had it as much. We are also hiring by that reallocation, not adding to the budget, but using the means within our current budget to reallocate and hire 2 more intervention teachers for each of the elementary, bringing the total at 4 elementaries from 2 teachers and multiple TAs to 4 teachers at each of the 3 elementary buildings and 1 TA to provide a much intensive academic support by the instructional leadership. And then also the board had the debate between 3 or no assistant principal, but with the consolidation, 1 assistant elementary principal that will work district-wide between all 3 buildings to help bring some consistency and also meet the increased needs of each of the buildings at this time. In addition, curriculum is our biggest driver, and it's one of our key functions. We have cut in the past budget over $250,000 to $300,000 from curriculum. We had about $30,000 that we've utilized this. We reduced that, and we have to eventually, because it's not sustainable, rebuild. The board allowed us to put in, I think it was it 20,000, Tony? Additional $20,000 or $30,000 into this, which is only about 10% of what we actually were using beforehand. And that will allow some of our MTS work to continue and strengthen. And then last, throughout, we've talked, we want each of our elementary students to have the same type of elementary experience, no matter what building they're in. And currently, we had 1 building that did a 4th grade play. That's that elementary administrator coordination, and now elementary 4th grade at each of the buildings. So each student, it should not matter where you live, but that they get the same similar educational experience. That's in the budget, not much, but the budget is strong at this point, and it meets what the community asked of us last year, and we will see what the community decides this year. Overall, the budget has 2 propositions. Proposition 1 is the actual adoption of the budget. Proposition 1 requires 60% for approval, because this is a challenged budget. Proposition 2 is the purchase of buses, not to exceed $1.9 million. This is offset by bonding as well as state aid and a 5-year cycle. This is something we do each year. The one thing I have to emphasize is that there is no 0 electric-based buses included in this purchase. We have heard from our community over and over again in the exit pollings that is not something that would probably be successful. We are asking the state to change that, but we also know that the state says we must start purchasing soon. We want to make sure that that's very clear for the voters, that there is no movement on that by the District of Horseheads. In addition, the Board of Education vote, the members of the Board of Education, there are 3 positions each year that are always up for election or re-election. And someone else that would like to be on the school board, that's what you can vote for, up to 3. The candidates are in order of their name, will appear on the ballot. Dan Christmas, Kara Sheehan, Matthew Feinberg, Nicole Tagari-White, Angie Finlayson, Liz Odell Wheeling, Mary Joan Glanton. There will be a candidates forum Wednesday, May 14th, here in the auditorium. There is an online opportunity to submit questions. Please understand that the questions will be reviewed by district administration and our district clerk to make sure that no question is, how would you say, for any one person, but that the questions can be reformulated if possible, so that all have an opportunity to answer with their opinion or perspective. And if something can't be done to make it available for all, then it would not be asked. Please feel free to go to our website and do that. Also, you can come in on that night, although we would really ask you to please submit questions beforehand. Ladies and gentlemen, the future district events are next Wednesday, 6 p.m., high school auditorium. It will be live streamed like we do, and we're the only district that really does this, records and posts regularly. I always give a shout out that we are the most transparent in our process, even though sometimes people don't believe that. This is why we are. I'd ask anybody to compare any other district to us. And then on Tuesday, May 20th, the budget vote and election of members of the Board of Education will be from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. in the high school north gym. We used to do it in the south. We only moved it just down from the south to the north. That way it won't cause voter confusion. All the signs will be up. All it means is you don't park in one place and you're going to see fencing there. There will be signs that will direct you to park. We have a handicap accessibility and it's very familiar with people. And we hope everybody will come out and participate because that's our civic responsibility. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, you have done this since February. You know this ad nauseum. At this time, it's time for the public hearing and people can make comments, but the budget is done. There is no dialogue on that. It's time for the public to weigh in.
All right, thank you, Dr. Douglas. And at this time, if we have any members of the community that wish to speak, this would be your time. We ask that you come to one of the two designated areas to speak. We ask that you state your name and address, and we ask that you not exceed 5 minutes. And the comments will be on the budget, obviously. And the last thing is, this is not really designed to be an interaction with the public. We are designed to hear your thoughts. So do we have anybody that wishes to speak?
Sure, I know, sorry. My name is Angie Finlayson. I live at 10 Glider Circle in Elmira. I'm a district taxpayer and a parent of 2 students in the district, just to put that out there. I watched every budget video and attended several budget hearings in person. And actually, I went back and rewatched ones that I was there in person for because I think I missed things. So I want to thank the board and administration for putting forth a budget that maintains staffing and programming for our students. However, my praise for your efforts would be empty without providing some necessary feedback. There were several requests to see a budget run that provided more TA support in the classrooms. More than one board member repeatedly asked to see a budget run with no administrative increases and instead TAs. Some felt that a compromise could be made and asked for a reduction of the 3 proposed administrators with an addition of a few TAs. This request was based on community feedback that was received as far back as last year, because I actually looked at last year's public hearing and somebody actually said that then too. So this request is actually from a long time ago. Unfortunately, the request was denied repeatedly. I'm frustrated that the board wouldn't, as a whole, seize the opportunity to explore something that the community is requesting. I'm disappointed that the board refused to build a consensus to advocate on behalf of the staff that desperately need the support in the classrooms. And to be honest, I'm a little angry that the administration would just choose to reduce the requested assistant principals and not even entertain the idea that the alternative had merit. It seemed like a stubborn and spiteful decision. That stonewalling blocked open communication and raised concern for me regarding the intent behind it. Nevertheless, I will be voting yes on this round of the budget because I worry about programs and staffing being cut if it fails. But if it doesn't pass, I encourage the board to consider the comments that are made here tonight, as well as comments that you've heard throughout the process from the community when you come back to the table to do the work that you were elected to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the community that wish to speak tonight? Seeing no takers, then I ask for a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? All right, thank you all for coming out tonight.
And
Drive
please come out
safely.
on May 20th, 7 to 9, to be participating in the vote for the Board of Education election and the district's budget. Thank you.